I want to talk about something that is juicy and hot off the presses and going on in the popular culture. And I know that I've got a bit of an international audience, so I'm going to try and make this as broadly applicable as possible. But without burying the lead, let's just dive right into it. There is a giant kerfuffle going on right now between one Steven Crowder of YouTube fame and another Daily Wire of not YouTube fame. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story before I dive into this, because I think that right now everybody is getting this story wrong. I think that they are misunderstanding what is going on. And I think that because especially cultural and political things have become so tribal that people basically just pick their side and they stick their flag in the sand and they say, "Here I die." I don't think that's what this is, even though I do think that that is the intent of some of the parties involved. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you a little bit of a story. Those of you familiar, Alexander the Great, when he landed on the Persian shores with the Greek army, he burned his boats. And then he turned to his men and he said, "We either sail home on Persian ships or we die." This is a fascinating study in commitment, and it's something that has been adopted in some ways into the business world, because people who have a fallback tend to not be as aggressive. They tend to not push as hard towards something. I've been following this story now for several days, since the first Steven Crowder video came out, because it just all of a sudden exploded all over YouTube. And I'm on YouTube fairly regularly. And so the narrative is that he had been offered an egregious offer that basically would chain him down to certain agreements. He wouldn't be able to produce content the way he wanted to and things like this. And without naming a company, he basically named them because he actually took a few other companies off the table while he was not naming them. And so there really wasn't a whole lot of room left. He also went on to say these corporations that were offering up the deals were more cutthroat than, case in point, the Disney Corporation, which is notoriously cutthroat in its business dealings and in its contractual dealings. So immediately setting a stage that these guys are not your friend, that these guys are going to go after you, they're going to get you however they can, and they're going to grind you down. And so what this did is this created some speculation. And what he did while he was doing this, and this is why I think everybody's understanding this, because everybody became misunderstanding this, because everybody became very emotional at this point, and they started picking sides.
This is where we fight! This is where they die! Lay down your weapons!
But I don't really usually go into the weeds on these things until more information has come out. And at that point, there just wasn't enough information. Well, he took this company that made him this offer, this egregious offer, to task. And then the company just came out and said, "Here's the whole contract." That company was Daily Wire. They read the whole contract. It took about an hour. There's a video. I'll put a description in this one down below. Actually, I'll link all these videos so that you guys can go through and just look at them for yourselves. But then this started creating some speculation, because what happened is Jeremy Boering, one of the CEOs over at Daily Wire, just basically laid out the contract. And he also noted something that Crowder had neglected to mention in his own video. He said this was for $50 million over the course of 4 years, with $25 million optional renewable 2 years down the road afterwards and all this stuff. So getting away from the actual dollar values, because again, I don't think this is important. And so then Crowder came out with another video, a reply to the reply, where he revealed that he had recorded a phone conversation with Jeremy Boering. Now, there is two different ways of looking at this, and people are basically picking sides based off of their personal biases and allegiances. I'm really trying to stay as above this as possible and keep as close to a 30,000 foot view as I can. But basically what happened is then Crowder responds with, as he puts it, the receipts. And he plays parts of recording that tacitly support his argument. And then the gloves are off.
You've never heard me say or write anywhere online that these offers weren't paying enough money. Why? Because it's not about the money.
It's not about money. It's about sending a message.
I'm talking about a movement. I'm talking about making a difference. It's not about the money.
And now it turns into a giant brouhaha where multiple hosts over from the Daily Wire side of things are just coming right out and saying Crowder is awful. How could he do this? How could he betray his friends and all these other things? A few of them are actually going through timelines and things like this. But one of the things I've noticed, this is just basically where things are at right now. Crowder hasn't responded to the response. And here's the thing. He probably will, but he's going to play it real cool. That's my prediction. He's going to keep it real cool because everything he has done has been keeping it real cool. This is coming from the guy who's usually impassioned and emotional about things. Whereas the Daily Wire, one of the CEOs, Ben Shapiro, he was made famous for a line, "Facts don't care about your feelings." Yet he is on the air making emotional pleas to Crowder, basically saying, how could you do this to your friends? How could you betray us? How could you throw us under the bus like this? And he's making points that, well, this wasn't an actual contract. This was a non-binding term sheet that we could negotiate off of and things like this. And by the way, I'm just going to put this out here. Every single business dealing I have ever done, every single job application I have ever applied for, anything along those lines, I've always negotiated. So there's no problems with expecting a negotiation. By the way, employers always expect a negotiation. And if you do not negotiate when you're going into employment, you're not doing your part of the job, because the employer will almost always lowball you a little bit, not because they're trying to rob you, but because they expect you to negotiate. So they got to set it a little bit lower because they know you're going to go a little bit higher, and then you guys meet in the middle. That's just the way it works. For better or worse, that is just the way it works. So there's nothing personally offensive about a negotiation. Another thing that I will say, though, and this is from my own experiences doing work, I had a part-time employee come to work with me. He did some shady stuff. He crashed my quad, taking it for a joyride. He wrecked one of my old-time coworkers' computers with a bunch of really weird porn. And basically, I had to get between these two guys to keep them from killing each other at one point. And so I said, with all of this in mind, just how much of a nuisance you've been, I'm going to pay for your bus ticket and I'm going to send you home because you just are not working. I tried giving him a chance. I gave him like 2 chances. I really, really tried with this guy, but he was just making it really difficult. And so he comes back to me a few months later when he needed money, is what I'm guessing. And he tries to blackmail me. He says, well, you didn't pay me the full amount. And I said, well, you didn't work the full amount of time. And he says, well, I've got a lawyer. You didn't pay me what you agreed, and I can make a deal out of this. I could drag your name through the mud. I could tie up your time. I could tie up your money and all these other things. And either that or you pay me $600. And I said, okay. And I met him and I handed him the check for $600. And he said, if you ever want to work with me again, I said, I'm never talking to you again. You burned that bridge. Okay? And so this is the kind of situation that's going on with Crowder and the Daily Wire. Crowder is very clearly, he didn't say Daily Wire when he was revealing the contract, but he left next to no room for doubt. Everybody knew that it was the Daily Wire he was dealing with or that he was negotiating with. And the things that he omitted from his own description were deliberately meant And by the way, the things he said as well. When you compare the Daily Wire to Disney Corporation, when very expressly the Daily Wire has basically said they're going to war with Disney over children's programming for various reasons, values misalignment and things like that. He was basically taking, and again, this is just an amazing psychological dig. There's a lot of intelligent people involved with this. All of these people are intellectual rock stars. I mean, I've got nothing on these guys. But at the end of this, the shrewdest, and Ben Shapiro is a Jewish lawyer, okay? So just throwing that out there. No dig at my Jewish brothers and sisters. I'm part Ashkenazi myself, but but you have this guy, Steven Crowder, and he very deliberately in his first video, and I watched that thing so carefully and I took notes just like, because I was fascinated by what he did. He took digs at their integrity, he took digs at their ethics, and he took digs at their conviction to the cause, because one of the things that a lot of the conservative talking heads and shows and whatnots do is they're all about the cause. They're passionate about the cause. This is a psychological tip, because people don't attract to people unless they're committed to something. But what Crowder did is he took deliberate digs that he knew would piss people over at Daily Wire off. He took digs at, again, their integrity, their ethics, their conviction to the cause, and then in the same breath, he said, I'm never going to do any of those things. I'm going to create something bigger and better and more pure. And this is the kicker right here. He has an incredibly devoted fan base. And you know who you are. You either love Crowder or you don't. Some people are kind of in the middle. They enjoy him sometimes and other times they don't. But he does have a very hardcore group of fans. Now, one of the things I noticed when I was looking at his Social Blade numbers over on YouTube and whatnot is that his subscriber count has not increased over the past 2 years. It's remained relatively stagnant at a very impressive, just shy of 6 million subscribers. And me sitting at nearly 500, I've got zero room to really make any dig at that. He is one of the biggest content creators on the platform. And mad props to the man for doing that. Mad props to anyone who succeeds in this kind of medium. But he's been stagnant. And he also just ended his contractual agreement with another company called The Blaze, which I think was formerly CRTV. And he realized that he had an opportunity. Now, I'm going to read you the timeline here of how things played out. And it is interesting. It also shows just how deliberate every step he took was, even down to the videos that he made, both of them. I'll get into the second video here in a minute. Okay, so I'm going to start with this. October 5th, 2022. This is after Crowder's agent solicited the Daily Wire for negotiations. So Crowder approached the Daily Wire. He receives on October 5th a term sheet with an offer of $50 million over the 4 years. On November 2nd, so this was almost a month later, Crowder responds with a $30 million counteroffer per year. So going from about $12 million per year, $12 to $15 million. Well, it's actually a little bit more than that. There was a lot of overhead costs in there and whatnot, but he basically went from $50 million for 4 years up to $30 million per year. So that was a giant counteroffer. And then on November 6th, 4 days later, he actually appears on a show with other Daily Wire hosts doing election coverage, and they seem to be, doing their thing pretty chummy. Just everything seems to be pretty normal. I've gone back and watched that just to kind of pick up on social cues to see if there was tension or anything like that involved. And it really didn't seem like there was.
Look at him, that handsome
Yes, we are
Dan.
live. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. I can hear you,
Well,
Stephen.
I tried to call in, and then Dennis Prager over there was holding court for some reason. He's got a university or something like that over there between the two Gentile. Well, I guess one Gentile and 2.5 Jews.
So
As you know, actually, Dennis and I together add up to 2 Jews. I'm like half, and Dennis is like a Jew and a half. I think that the feeling.
Wait, are you guys just going to avoid the incredible discomfort that Andrew Klavan converted from Judaism?
We just ignore that. We pretend that didn't happen.
Until they need the magic healing, Steve.
All right. We'll see how it all comes out in God's ledger.
You should watch Andrew handle snakes. It is remarkable.
By the way, Klavan will be the first person to find out whether he was right or wrong in this room.
And you'll get a note. You're going to get a note.
Hey, Andrew, nice to see you, by the way.
Hey.
And Ben and Candace. Candace, you're the smallest from the depth of field because I'm looking at a camera and you're also. Oh, hi, Candace. Okay, looking lovely. You make all these guys look like. So.
I think of the courage it takes to sit next to them.
I'm not being facetious at all.
So November 6th, that happens. And then on November 14th, Daily Wire, so days after the election coverage where he appeared with them, and almost 2 weeks after he gave his counter, the Daily Wire responds to Crowder by saying they cannot meet his demands, thus they're ending the negotiation. That's it. Okay, so here's where things get interesting. On December 12th, Crowder registers domain Stop Big Con, Stop Big Conservative, because Daily Wire is a conservative outlet. And then on December 15th, Crowder's contract with his current employer ends. Okay, so 3 days later. So he filed the domain name before his contract ended. And then 36 days later, on January 9th, Crowder reaches out to Boering on a phone conversation and records it without Jeremy Boering's knowledge. Okay. In his first video, Crowder said that he basically was putting all this stuff out here. He basically said, don't challenge me. I have the receipts. So it was a very low-key threat. Like, don't piss me off. I'll swing back if you swing first, even though he was the one swinging first. And so then on January 17th, this is almost a week afterwards. Actually, it is almost exactly a week afterward. Crowder launches his initiative, Stop Big Con. And that's his email membership drive, his new email membership drive. And that's when he dropped his first video, was on January 17th. And so with all of these, I mean, really not very thinly veiled personal attacks in there, Jeremy Boering of the Daily Wire responds by reading the entire contract, which is, props for transparency. Now, there's a lot of people out there who take issue with the contract itself, or it wasn't a contract, it was a term sheet, but it could have become a contract. And there's a lot of people that take issue with the specifics of it, and even excluding the $50 million price tag attached to it if Crowder's worth that much and they think he's worth that much, or he thinks he's worth more, whatever. That's their negotiation, not mine. But then, and you can tell that Jeremy, I watched this video very closely. I watched it twice, actually, because you can tell he's hurt, actually. You can tell that. He's hurt and he's ticked. And you can actually, I've seen these guys together. They do seem friendly with each other. So this was a very interesting move on Crowder's part that really, really caught the Daily Wire off guard. And so then Crowder responds with his own video where he plays small segments of the phone recording that he made. And this creates an absolute storm. Now you've got hosts all over the place from the Daily Wire who are basically saying, no, I'm not locked into a slave contract. You have people casting aspersions at the Daily Wire for dealing in all these different ways. And so basically now you force the Daily Wire into a position of vulnerability right after announcing that you're going to be launching your own network, a competitor network. And so now you have everybody over at Daily Wire who's just absolutely broadsided by this. Probably the only response that I've heard that was above the bar classy was from Andrew Klavan.
All right, I was going to leave talking about Crowder off till the end of the show and just address it briefly, but it's kind of blown up, and I'm only going to talk about this one time. I didn't want anybody to think I was avoiding it, so I'm going to talk about it. I talked about it already on the All Access a little bit, but I do think I have to talk about it, and I'll explain it all. I'm really sad about it. It has made me unhappy.
And his response basically was, man, I think you're doing the wrong thing. I still love you. I hope the best for you, but I really wish you hadn't done this. And that was probably the classiest response I've heard, because Andrew Klavan's a very classy guy. But everybody else is just pissed. They're just beyond pissed. And this is where we come into my first point that I made and why I think everybody's getting this wrong. People are taking sides. People are saying, no, Steven Crowder's right. No, Daily Wire's right. No, he broke ethical codes. He recorded him without permission. No, they've been friends for so long. Well, if they've been friends for so long, why did they give him such a crappy contract and all this other stuff? And you've got just this, everybody is focused on the wrong things. It's all wrong. They're not seeing the point. Crowder is starting his own initiative. He said it himself, and I quote, this is in his first video, okay? It's time for Mug Club to go big, or it is time for me to go home. Just like Alexander. Here's what he did. He galvanized his supporters by making a plea to them, saying that I am a true believer. I am your David, okay? And since we're doing so well and we've conquered all of our Goliaths within our own sphere, we're going to find a new Goliath to conquer. And this is going to galvanize my followers behind me. And he found his Goliath. And I'm not saying that he's going to conquer the Daily Wire, but what I am saying is that he took a nice big swing at him and he hit, because he got exactly what he wanted. He got the attention. He galvanized his supporters. He promoted his brand, and he is staying cool and calculated, because this is a calculated move for him. It's, in my opinion, an incredibly cynical move, but it is a calculated move, and it is paying off. It is working for him so well. And while everybody else is taking sides and getting emotional about it, he's just sitting back there and he's watching his mailing list go up and up and up and up and up. And this is again why I find this so fascinating, because you have to be analytical about it. You have to take a step back, and you have to realize that the biggest dog in the room right now is Steven Crowder, because he played y'all. He played everybody, and he, for better or worse, is getting what he wants out of it. So just like Alexander the Great, just like Cortez, just like so many others throughout history, they realize that the only way that they can fully commit to their cause is by burning the boats. Steven Crowder burned his boats with this. He will never work for another company again. And he knows this. That is why he said, it is time for Mug Club to go big, or it's time for me to go home. He knows he'll be just fine. He's financially very well off. But he burned all of his bridges. He burned all of his boats. He will never be able to gain employment with anyone in the sphere again, because of the way he dealt with someone who presumably he was negotiating with in good faith. And I'll leave this question to you guys. But if you were looking to hire someone and you gave them privileged information for the purposes of negotiating a contract, and they went out and spilled the beans about it with the whole world and tried to cast you in a bad light, would you ever hire them again? Or furthermore, would anybody else within your sphere of influence hire them again after they did you dirty like that? Nope, they wouldn't. Crowder knows this. He absolutely knows this. And he's planning on it. And so now he has a very devoted following with him. He's going to continue doing what he's doing. He is now going to try and build his own network, because what he has done is he has dealt a devastating blow to his biggest competitor, and that was the Daily Wire. And he allowed them, what is the phrase? He allowed them to hoist themselves on their own petard. He basically gave them just enough rope so that they could hang themselves with it. And he did it in a way to where he knew they would respond in an emotional way, very uncharacteristic for them because, again, facts don't care about your feelings, crew. And yet everything they've done, I mean, there have been plenty of facts on their side, but mostly it's been led by pleas of how could you do this to your friends, and emotion, and you are despicable, you're worse than these guys, how could you betray us this way? So he's allowed them to do this to themselves. And you notice radio silence. He hasn't said a thing. He doesn't really need to. In fact, all he has to do at this point is just turn them into the butt of his jokes moving forward, and he'll do just fine. And then maybe he can offer different deals to independent creators. Maybe some of the things he said he could do in his first video, he's capable of doing. And so what he does is he creates an alternate space. He becomes the David again, which he's always thrived on being. He's always thrived on being the giant slayer. And when all the giants ran away from him, he had no more giants to slay. So he basically turned around to the guy standing next to him, slapped him upside the head, and created a new giant. And again, this is a fascinating thing for me. So I just wanted to go through and break down some of my thoughts on it. Again, everybody's getting this wrong. He burned his boats. He pulled an Alexander. He pulled a Cortez. He burned his boats. He turned to his soldiers and said, we either sail home on Persian ships or we don't sail home at all. And again, I quote, it's time for Mug Club to go big, or it's time for me to go home. So I'm going to leave that fascinating little piece of cultural insight with you guys. And hopefully you found this as interesting as I did. I wanted to take because there's a lot of, political and cultural and tribal and whatnot biases and things, and people just can't seem to talk and have a conversation anymore. And I hope this is an opportunity for, again, an opportunity to maybe learn a little bit more about what's going on here culturally in the US of A, if you're from overseas. And if you are here and you either agree or disagree with these people for varying reasons, it's still a very interesting cultural moment. And it's an interesting, it goes to show you that at the very least, Steven Crowder is a true believer. He believes what he believes, and he's willing to pretty much give everything for it. This was a very calculated move on his part. He was expecting everything that happened. And so far, he's the one playing chess while everybody else is playing checkers. So, gonna leave it there. Peace out, y'all. Have a good night. Bye.